Oh, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon and namaste from Nepal.
Good afternoon to all.
Hello, good afternoon.
Okay.
So good afternoon, everyone, and happy Europe Day. This is Mohan from the technical room. The program will start with Nepali anthem and end with EU anthem. And we have the facility of simultaneous translation, both in English and in Nepali. So the panelists and or the participants could choose to speak in either Nepali or English, and also get the translation either in English and Nepali. Thank you very much.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all to this session where we will be talking about the current challenges of mainstreaming the circular economy in Nepal. Before we start the panel, I would like to welcome Her Excellency Nona Depret, Ambassador and Head of the Delegation of the European Union to Nepal, for her opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Sadikchya, and good afternoon and namaste to all. Very happy to be here with you virtually. As you know, this is the fourth day of the European Week celebration, this virtual celebration for a second year in a row because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We cannot be together physically, but at least we can share the virtual space and stay safe. I think it was still important to celebrate this day because we wanted to demonstrate our strength, our unity, our diversity, and solidarity in these difficult times all over the world. And I'm very happy also that the European Union and its member states will be able to bring in some emergency supplies to support Nepal in its response to this really crisis, COVID second wave. So, because I think we all know that the solution to this global problem has to be global as well, and we're all in this together. So this is really a clear message from the European Union, which we have learned through our 71 years of common history of our peace process. So I'm also happy to say that virtual does not mean less good this year, because in the first 3 days, our member states have organized really interesting and lively panels on climate change and inequalities, and I hope you have been able to follow them, or maybe you have you can still see them on our Facebook and on our social media. And today, of course, continuing the theme of green recovery, this panel will discuss circular economy, which is one of the 3 pillars for the European Green Deal. So I just wanted to give you kind of like the broader context on why we thought that it was very important to organize this panel with the Nepal Economic Forum. And I'm very excited to hear more about the panelists, that they will shed light on the practices, the challenges, but also the opportunities that we have here in Nepal, and also trying to mainstream really these circular economy into the national strategies and action plans, and to share lessons learned. So just a very quick reminder on the Green Deal, which I think you know by now is very, very close to my heart. And because this is really our own climate neutral growth strategy, and where we want to aim for an inclusive and healthy people and planet. So this is what we want to do internally, but it's also what we would like to share with our partners across the world, because this is going to be a major revolutionary change in the way we consume, the way we produce, and the way we live. And our goal, you know, is to have a carbon neutral economy in Europe by 2050. And we want to encourage our friends and partners in the world to do the same. So the Green Deal really has these 3 building blocks. It has the biodiversity strategy, which is to establish protected areas in 30% of our land and seas. I think this is also something which is very important to Nepal, because Nepal is very vulnerable to the loss of biodiversity, which is one of its major assets, and which is very important, as we have seen in the panel on Tuesday, for the entire Himalaya Kush region. So we also want to restore degraded ecosystems. Unfortunately, in Europe, we have many degraded ecosystems, and we want to plant 30 billion trees by 2030. The second building block of this European Green Deal is our farm to fork strategy. And there again, I think this is very interesting for Nepal, because we want to try to improve farming practices, and especially to reduce pollution from pesticides and from excess nutrients. We want to promote soil conservation, and we want this to lead us, the consumers in Europe, to healthier diets and better landscapes. And then finally, we come to the subject of today's panel, and the third building block of the European Green Deal, which is the Circular Economy Action Plan. This is really crucial to reduce pressure on natural resources, because we want to tackle the entire life cycle of a product. So this is really working on this life cycle from production and consumption to waste management, and also the market for secondary raw materials. So this is just in a nutshell what the European Green Deal is about. So I'm very happy to hear more about the panel. And I'm also very happy that we have joined forces with the Nepal Economic Forum for this panel, because Nepal Economic Forum really has a history with circular economy. You have launched the Himalayan Circular Economy Forum together with the German embassy. So thank you very much to Sujeev Shakya, to Sadikchya, and to your entire team for working with us. So Sadikchya and the panelists, over to you, and looking forward to this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your remarks. It is really great to know about the European Union's plans on green growth and green recovery. We now move on to our panel. I would like to have all the panelists in the spotlight, please. As we're doing that, I would like to welcome everyone again, to people in this meeting and to those of you watching us live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I'm glad that with virtual meetings, we can have delegates from all over the world tuning in from the comfort of their homes. We'd definitely love to hear more from you during the Q&A session after the panel. Like mentioned earlier, we would want this to be an inclusive discussion, and so attendees can select between Nepali and English audio channels and enjoy the session in their language of choice. So to do that, you may be able to see the interpretation button at the bottom of your meeting screen, the globe icon. Simply click on it and choose the language you would like to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Sadikchya Singh, the moderator for this session and coordinator of Himalayan Circular Economy Forum, one of the initiatives of Nepal Economic Forum to explore the concept of circular economy and contribute in paving a path towards sustainable businesses and societies in Nepal. It started back in 2019, where we had some rich discussions in circular economy and with the expertise of our board member, Anouk Pandey. We are taking the initiative forward under the guidance and expertise of Mark Perrin from the British Embassy, and currently we are leveraging this platform to analyze the current state and find improvement potentials with regard to inefficiencies in the country's waste management sector. If we look at all the big issues of current times, from climate crisis to COVID, all of it has been sort of pointing us towards reflection and recalibration of ourselves as individuals, the environment, and the economy. And while doing that, a term that gets thrown around a lot is circular economy, an approach to move away from the current unsustainable linear model and address the issue of finite resources crisis. Our objective with our time today is to share some of the thoughts about the challenges in mainstreaming this approach in a country like Nepal, which has not only shown consistent and promising economic growth, but also a new dimension of waste problems. And while doing that, we'd also want to learn from the best practices in the European Union, which has been a leading force with its circular economy related policies, material innovations, and processes. A circular economy isn't about one firm changing one product. It's about many actors working together to create effective flows of materials and information. Mirroring that is our panel today, which represents individuals with diverse approaches to enacting and practicing circularity. We have Dr. Arab Hoballah, team leader of European Union Switch Asia Sustainable Consumption and Production Facility, which enables stakeholders in Asian countries in developing and delivering policies and actions in support of transformative change for sustainable consumption and production. We also have Anouk Tamrakar, a manufacturing and brand consultant for companies around the world who put may I please request all Thank you. I would also like, before moving any further, I would like to request all the attendees to kindly unmute themselves, because that might be a bit distracting to the speakers. We have Anouk Tamrakar, a manufacturing and brand consultant for companies around the world who put qualitative and ethically manufactured products at the heart of their operations. Also in the panel is Raghavendra Mahto, co-founder of Doko Recyclers, a social enterprise that has been managing and recycling dry waste in the Kathmandu Valley since 2017. Thank you very much for agreeing to speak at this panel. Before we jump onto the Nepal context of circular economy, maybe it would be good to understand more about this approach, its necessity, and how the European Union has been working towards it, because I feel that's really going to help us shape this discussion. So I'd want to start off with Dr. Arab and request him to take us through the Circular Economy Action Plan adopted by the European Commission, and also give us some more idea about circular economy. Dr. Arab, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for this introduction. Thank you, Ambassador Nona Depres. I'm happy to be in this panel. Happy not to be in this kind of official panel, but I'm very glad to see the two panelists from completely different horizon. which means that we'll be having different type of presentation and a very interactive discussion. Up front, the ambassador already introduced a little bit what I'm going to say. She provided a good framework, and Mrs. Sadikchya also highlighted where I'm going. Just one word before starting. I have been preaching for sustainable consumption production for 30 years. I'm one of the godfathers who put SCP high on the UN agenda. I can tell you, unfortunately, we are moving backward, and the pandemic is one of the results of our irresponsible and unsustainable consumption and production patterns. I hope our leaders, industry leaders, consumers will get the point right now. Otherwise, as some people said, I keep on repeating it, we're going to hell, but I hope we will not go there. Let me now share a little bit about the Circular Economy Action Plan. And let me share the screen. Okay. Okay, how it comes now to share the screen, why it's not coming. Seem to have difficulties sharing the screen. Can you do it from your side, please? Yes, okay. Thank you very much. Oh, is it mine? Okay, thank you. I don't know if it is me or yours. We're looking here at the current challenges and of circular economy in Nepal. But before, let us have a brief overview of the Circular Economy Action Plan as defined by the EU. It will be a few-minute presentation. Usually this is done in hours if you want to grasp it entirely. So we hope that we will be getting the right element there to move further on that. Can I get next slide, please? Okay. As the ambassador introduced it already, we have different components here in under the European Green Deal. But I want to add two more strategies that are extremely important in the context of a Green Deal and closely related to the Circular Economy Action Plan, in addition to the Farm to Fork strategy, which are the EU industrial strategy and the plastic strategy. Both of them are intrinsically linked to the Circular Economy Action Plan, because all the manufacturing processes to work on design and to reduce waste is very much linked to the EU industrial strategy, as well as to the major problem that we have, not only in Europe, but all around the world on the plastic issue, which is the very visible pollution that we are not very well able to handle that, in addition to other pollutions. Can I get next one, please? Now, why the EU came to this set of strategies in the context of the EU Green Deal? The facts speak by themselves. The way we are extracting the resource, the material, is just not scary, it's frightening. We are just getting out these major resources from Earth, and we are wasting them. We are not working in an efficient manner. We're destroying the biodiversity and affecting the water resources, which are at the bottom of our economic development. We're generating more and more waste. And at the EU context, just the recycled material is only 12%. I say EU, which is the most advanced region in the world. So what do you do with the others? And keep in mind here behind that globally, we expect to have in the next 25 years, 3 billion additional middle-class consumers. More than 2 billion will be in Asia. and you will see how much waste, how much first resources we need, and how much waste we'll be generating if we keep business as usual, which is not an option. And that's why circular economy comes here as an absolute necessity, not a choice. It's an absolute necessity. Next one, please. It is, as I said, it requires hours to present. It has 35 actions along the life cycle of the product. So the products are at the center of the circular economy action plan, looking to see how do we produce sustainable products and how we can put at the disposal of the consumers those products. We need to inform them, we need to empower them, we need to guide them, and work on those set of most important products that are put on the market, ensuring less waste. But this will only start at the bottom, starting with the design, and not keeping it as always at the national level, but looking down to earth, looking at the people, the region, and the cities. Keep in mind that consumers are citizens. It's at the city, and that's where things happen. And the best place to deal with circular economy is at the city level more than a national level. And of course, this requires global effect because you cannot do it on your own. Next slide, please. As I said, the products are at the center of this circular economy action plan. Looking at the facts, which means that the products are not sustainable, destroy quickly, consumers are not well aware, easy to buy, just go and throw. Production processes are not efficient. From these facts, the EU realized that we need to start on the product design from the bottom, from the starting point. And that's where we can make a product that could be better recyclable, that can use better product, that we look at the sources, and then, of course, inform the consumers for that. So this overarching framework on which the EU is working in order to support consumption and production patterns is essential, and it's leading, in fact, the process throughout the world. Next one, please. Designing sustainable products, of course, requires a certain number of instruments. First one is policy and legislation. The government has to put the right framework for that in order to inform about the green product and to get the right legislation. Most of the time we were saying that, oh, this is on voluntary basis. Fine, but voluntary basis does not work always very well. So if the government put properly the right policy and legislative framework and inform accordingly, we can move progressively to what's supposed to be the exception to become the norm. Next one, please. And of course, the consumers. The EU, compared to most of other regions of the world, really deal directly with the consumers, listen to the consumers who do have a power in influencing the strategy, would it be through European Parliament or in the countries and so on. And this is really unique in the world. It's extremely important. And this is something where we need to learn from how to inform and empower the consumers so that they can influence the decision makers on what should be changed in relation to environmental issue, recyclability, and so on, to the extent that the government should be leading by example by having green public procurement to become really clear, explicit, and mandatory at all processes. And we're doing a lot of this in Asia, together with reporting, which is most of the time greenwashing in many companies, but some of them are doing it seriously, and the EU is very strict on this issue. Next one, please. Those are the sectors in pictures on which the Circular Economy Action Plan is putting priority. Electronics, batteries and vehicles, packaging and plastics. We know how much they have been negatively impacted during the pandemic. Like, we cannot stop it. And plastic, we have lost almost 20 years now. I live in Bangkok. It's horrible to see how plastics came back and so on. Textile is one of the major issues because consumers just buy quickly and so on. constructing and building, we are really missing the point. That's where we can make a big change. And again, here in Bangkok or in Jakarta or in Manila, when you see all these skyscrapers who are all but energy efficient and using all this material, we wonder where we are going. So we definitely need to rethink the whole process. Next, please. And of course, the starting point when you make your design is to make sure that you will get less waste at the end. And in case you get waste, because for the process today not mature enough or for any reason we have to get some waste, we need to see how to use it, how to make best out of it. Any waste is valuable. So we just have to make sure how to use it and not to throw it away. And for this, the law, the policies, legislation, and information is extremely important. Next one, please. For that, the EU has been, and I can tell you that after my 30 years or so in the UN, we would not have advanced on sustainability, on green economy, on circular economy, if not with the EU. The EU were always the ones pushing that. And I can tell you as a negotiator, I was always in the corner seeking with the opinion of the EU, trying to see how they can back us up, how we can move ahead on that and so on. So they keep on playing this role, pushing for global agreement on plastic, the Global Alliance on Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency. They are currently discussing at UNEA, United Nations Environmental Assembly, on how to push their elements through what used to be called UNEP and their management board, and also reflecting this on agreement with different countries. They are having bilateral negotiation with the main countries in order to see how they can effectively promote and mainstream a circular economy. Next one, please. Now, very briefly, I know that we don't have much time and you will be raising some questions around that. Where do I come? This is my double hat. I will speak on behalf of the EU now about the Switch Asia program. The Switch Asia program fits perfectly on all those elements, maybe except the biodiversity one, all the elements of the Green Deal. When it's come to the different activities we are implementing, by mainly looking at how to mainstream sustainable consumption production in existing policies or in policies being drafted, or by designing an SCP action plan on its own. And this support is provided to governments, but also to companies, small and medium enterprises, and consumers. So we are working at different scales, I would say at all scales, by demonstrating, because we cannot do all at the same time with the budget we have, but demonstrating in different areas and then trying to bring them all under what we call the multi-stakeholder consultation for a local delivery, always in the context of a system approach. And this is absolutely necessary for circular economy. If we miss the system approach and the life cycle approach, we will not implement circular economy. We will not implement sustainable consumption and production. Next, please. This very briefly, I don't want you to look at the figures. All the projects that have been implemented, the grant project that we call the 127 project implemented over the last 12 years, as I said, are touching all those strategies. And on the circular economy action plan related to waste, we have 38 out of our 127 projects, which means that from the start, it has been one of our top priorities, and we have been dealing on that in many countries. Next, please. Now, we organized recently, time is running fast, but in October 2018, I can tell you a very interesting multi-stakeholder consultation meeting in Kathmandu. I was amazed by the stakeholders around the table and their interactiveness and so on. For any reason, we did not move much further. But at that time, it was very clear. Inefficient energy and resource uses. 2 years, of course, it remained the same, if not worse. The current growth with increasing environmental impact, major waste generation, and unsustainable consumption production by copying others. We need, and this is interesting, what has been identified as needs correspond actually to the priority of the Circular Economy Action Plan at the EU and hopefully for Nepal. Waste minimization, waste to energy, mainly in cities, and tourism, because Nepal depends a lot on tourism, resource efficiency, material use, grain sustainable procurement. I did not adapt them to what we said. This is in our report of October 2018, and working with small and medium enterprises and awareness raising. Next one, please. This is the last one. Basically, and if you can add the text, please, go on the next. Yes, you have three of them, 1, 2, 3. So switching to sustainable consumption production and circular economy, I link them. SCP can help really deliver circular economy. We need to enable. It's not just to tell to the people that's what you have to do. You have to support them to do the thing. You have to enable them to do them. And enabling is different. Is a legislation, is a capacity building, is helping them to go to the bank, in helping the small and medium enterprises handling this or that. And it does not occur by force. You cannot do it with a stick. You need the stick and the carrot. But with the stick and the carrot, you still need what I call the tambourine. This is an expression that I have done, sticks, carrots, and tambourine myself. And tambourine means make noise, talk about it, inform the people, tell them this is the legislation, these are the enabling mechanisms, these are the incentives, so that within the system, the individual, the small and medium enterprises, and the private sector and government can effectively all together deliver an impact. Sorry if I have been a little bit late, but I will wait for time for question later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, just trying to unmute myself. Thank you so much, Dr. Araf, for that informative presentation. A lot of ideas, a lot of food for thought, a lot to think about. I would like to take some time to really ponder upon that presentation and come back to you with more questions. But for now, I would like to move on to our other panelists and ask them to introduce the work they are doing and let us all know how it relates to circular economy. So maybe we can start off with Anouk. We'll have to wait for some time for the host to unmute the participants. Yeah.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yes. Okay. So I first of all would like to thank you for inviting me for this panel. It really means a lot to me that you give a voice to people who work on the ground and directly connect to the local industries. My name is Anouk Tamrakar Versteeg. I'm born in the Netherlands, but living for the past 8 years in Nepal. I am a Nepal-based manufacturing and brand consultant, as Sadikchya earlier explained. I work with brands who produce artisanal products in Nepal. The companies I work with, they all aim to put people and planet first in their manufacturing processes and work towards transparent supply chains. I'm also co-founder of Teamwork Platform, which is a common ground for local artisans, designers, and entrepreneurs in Kathmandu. I would say it's a shared ground where you foster partnership and cooperation amongst brands for greater innovation, building networks, help tackling supply chain issues, and strive towards bridging the gap between the brand and the market. Yeah, so thank you again, Sadikchya. That's the work I do.
Yes, Anouk, would you like to tell us more about how it relates to circular economy, the bigger purpose?
I think you know, the most of the brands I work with, and especially the brands that choose to produce in Nepal from around the world, they all aim for more sustainable manufacturing processes. And there's where my work is, I think, very connected with what we aim with the circular economy. It's all about finding more efficient ways to use resources, find sustainable packaging solutions, create shorter supply chains, transparency in where our material comes from and how it is made. So yeah, I think this, this I'm doing on a daily basis. So I think that's very connected to where we talk about today.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Anouk. Moving on to our other panelist, Raghavendra Mahto. Raghav, would you like to talk about eco-recyclers and also tell us how it relates to the bigger purpose of circular economy?
Sure. Thank you, Sadikchya. So Doku Recyclers has been in operation since last 4 years. We work in dry waste management in Kathmandu Valley, including electronic waste management. So the business model is basically we implement source segregation of waste, which is fundamental in proper waste management. And we provide collection services using an integrated IT platform to increase the efficiency in terms of logistic and volume tracking. The waste collected is transported to a materials recovery facility where it gets sorted into categories and further gets passed on to waste processors who actually turn it into secondary raw materials that is supplied to the factories, which is basically the whole concept of circular economy. Right now, we are processing about 100 tons of waste per month, and we plan to increase our capacity to 300 tons per month by 2022. So one of the biggest contributing factor that we implement in our work is source segregation of waste, which is still not practiced in, let's say, our country. And most of the waste management companies are not implementing this, and which affects the entire waste value chain in terms of the quality of raw materials that we get out of, let's say, once the waste is being collected. So one of the most important factor is actually source segregation, and second is behavioral change, which is one of our biggest challenge. We all know why we have to segregate, but to implement this, it becomes a whole different challenge. Yeah, so that is how we are working right now in Kathmandu.
Thank you so much, Raghav. It's really great to hear about all of your works. Maybe we could now deep dive and look into more of the challenges that you have been facing in your work. I would like to take this back to Dr. Arab. As someone who has worked very closely with the different countries in Asia as well as in the Europe to make that switch to circular economy, I'm sure you may have, seen a lot of challenges. I understand Nepal has a 5% share of all the Switch Asia project grants. Could you tell us more about the challenges you have encountered or you think you might encounter with these projects in Nepal? Dr. Arab?
Yes, thank you very much. It's more than 5%. So to reassure you,
Sure.
And compared to the size of the country, I believe Nepal received support through the grant project any other country in Asia. We have 10 projects that have been implemented or are being implemented in the construction sector, manufacturing, and tourism sector. Awareness raising, and I remember I was still in UNEP when I were supervising some of the projects here with my team from there. We have done a lot in this sector, but as I said earlier, these are pilot projects that need to be scaled up. So probably we were short, the EU and the partners, we were short in looking at the mechanism and the platform for scaling up those projects. Was it difficult? Yes, one of the main difficulties is about governance, and that's what we faced in Nepal, and that's what I clearly highlighted when we had our meeting in 2018, is how we can bring around the same table different ministries together with other stakeholders. It's already a big challenge to have 4 or 5 different ministries sitting together around the same table and discussing a common issue. It's not typical of Nepal, but it has been extremely important. Mm-hmm. And by bringing different industries and the municipalities, which is important in Nepal, is your new governance structure that empowers more the local authorities, is something that is extremely important and have not been exploited properly as of today. Circular economy, SCP, as I said, is something that is localized. Think global, act local. And this is exactly what we have to do with circular economy and sustainable consumption production. So those constraints can be overcome if we effectively manage to have proper consultation between the different stakeholders, The difficulty also, and this is very well understood, Nepal is developing country. People are aspiring for consumption. You cannot go and tell them, oh, no, 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 you cannot consume. And this is the big problem of promoting responsible consumption. How you promote it, how you speak with the people. And you need a good civil society who would be able to do it. And I believe in Nepal, these are very weak. And that's where comes what is in the Circular Economy Action Plan about enabling the consumers, is to how the government can effectively take responsibility on that and induce support to a certain extent the civil society to effectively take on board those responsibility issues, inducing the consumers and also recognizing the good enterprises, the good small and medium enterprises that are doing right. We are not yet there. Nepal is not alone in those, I would say, constraints and mistakes, but things can be done, but they have to be done on the right way from now. And there is hope of doing things so.
Yes, definitely. I think if we have that kind of legislation, and if we really like recognize the businesses that have been doing it, I think that only provides a very good force for this to work. Talking about challenges, Anouk, you've been working with responsible businesses around the globe. I was hoping if you could shed light on the challenges that you have experienced in helping brands design circular strategies. So what has your experience been like?
Thanks, Sadikchya. So I would say more than challenging in strategy, I think a lot of the brands that, oh, am I still on mute?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, something turned off on my screen. I think I work with brands that they're very, very aware of the circular economy and sustainable practices. What we especially see is very complicated supply chains, and this is a very big challenge in Nepal. To give you an example, we currently see a growth in manufacturers of skincare and soap products, which actually very great change to see, because these products are most often made with sustainability in mind while creating the formulas and recipes, zero waste. But the biggest challenge is to find sustainable packaging materials available in the local market. Especially for the liquid and semi-liquid products, I can assure you that you won't find any suitable packaging solutions. And for that same reason, we see producers stopping making this kind of products. What's a shame, because it's such a great solution of replacement for shampoo bottles and plastic wrap imported soaps from India and China, while we can make something, much more sustainable local. For international clients, I experience the same kind of challenges. But they all relate to supply chain complications and inefficient supply chains. Just to give you an example, when we talk about the gemstones, it's very, well-known problem. We have so many gemstone mines in Nepal, but instead of investing in protecting our stones here, creating standards for ethical sourcing and processing and polishing them locally, we send them all to India, and local artisans will have to buy them back from India. I mean, this is not only super unsustainable and doesn't support any local communities, but it also is unnecessary transport and etc. But again, also for my clients from Europe, the biggest issue is sustainable packaging materials. I mean, the reality is Nepal is a production country, and I think we will be in the future. And these are problems that we really have to soon solve. Because what I see is that there are products that we need to package individually. There is no other solution for it. As we can find on the local market, we can find sustainable solutions. They start importing them to Nepal, packaging here, and then again send them back to Europe. I mean, I always start to think that the plastic itself is more sustainable than sending it a sustainable solution up and down from Europe back to Europe, right? So, and the frustrating thing is all these brands, they really have people and planet in the heart of their company, you know, but they struggle so much with efficient sourcing of raw materials. So yes, I think Nepal is a manufacturing a manufacturing country. It will be, but it's just very poor in producing raw materials for their own industries, and we rely too much on materials from India and China. This is not only unsustainable and doesn't add any value to the circular economy, it also takes away livelihood and local jobs for local communities. And I do understand that Nepal is very reliant on import duties, which is also one of the problems. But it's a shame that policies are not designed in a way to support and boost local industries, but rather focus on import taxes. Because just imagine what would happen if we create a complete supply chain for gemstones in Nepal. I just give gemstones an example. I work across industries, but if we would mine them here, cut and polish them locally, and create a more valuable product within our own country, this will bring great job opportunities to rural areas. It will boost the rural economies when they will be able to sell their high-value polished stones to artisans in Kathmandu. It will reduce migration of skilled Nepalese workers and will not have an unnecessary transportation and footprints. And I really feel heavy in my heart to see that we have a lot of natural high value resources. And I'm not talking only about stones, but also natural fibers, etc. And we keep them, sending them outside the country while we actually, you know, could tap into that ourselves.
Definitely.
So
that is...
these are challenges I see, but I work across a lot of craft industries, and they all have the challenges of their own. But yeah, it all relates to that very first steps in the supply chain.
Right. I mean, yeah, that is definitely unfortunate to not have sustainable packaging, even when you really, really wanted to be there. More on that, I think, you know, the policies that has to be in the place. I really like how you frame that. More on that maybe in the later conversation. Now moving on to Doko, I think while we talk about product and packaging, that's definitely one important spectrum of circular economy. But the other aspect, which is also equally important, is post-consumer product retrieval and reuse, which Doko has been doing very successfully by setting up a reverse supply chain and obtaining products from consumers. As one of the pioneers in the recycling sector, Raghav, I want to ask you, what has your challenges been like?
Yeah, Sadikchya. So what I feel, or what as a company we feel, is the current recycling and, let's say, composting infrastructures in Nepal are unable to keep pace with the growth of waste. As more people shift to urban areas, waste volume is almost doubling every 5 years in our country. And another enormous challenge is modernizing waste collection, segregation, treatment, and disposal, given the lack of investment in waste infrastructure in Nepal. Also, we don't see any successful public and private partnership model in waste sector. This is because of lack of policies again, that is kind of not focused on de-risking the investment and inviting more private companies to participate in setting up recycling industries. Along with this, I would specifically talk about two waste categories. One is obviously plastic waste, which has been problematic in terms of collection and its recyclability. In this linear plastic economy, there is actually not much emphasis on unlocking the market potential of secondary plastic, that is recycled plastic. Incentive or binding policies to use recyclable materials or recycled materials compared to virgin materials, which kind of affects the entire value chain. Thus, we are seeing slow decline in the collection and processing of plastic waste in overall. Also, the value chain of plastic kind of got affected when India and also China put a ban in, import of plastic waste. So Nepal actually needs to kind of prepare and policies for industries to invest in recycling industries. Otherwise, after some point of time, we will actually face a lot of trouble in managing plastic waste. One of another biggest challenge in plastic waste is the composite materials. Those are the wrappers, let's say, for example, fiber wrappers or biscuit wrappers. And this is again, it's a global issue where companies are not able to use recyclable packaging in their production or manufacturing processes, and thus it kind of creates a problem, once the consumer uses it. So recyclable grade plastic in packaging can only be integrated through policy level. It cannot be done through consumer level, but it has to come through policy level. And the second waste category that I would want to focus on is e-waste, because again, we are a landlocked country and we don't have infrastructure in terms of really dealing with complex waste like electronic waste. So far, we are one of the first professional company in managing dismantling electronic waste, but let's say 95% of electronic waste is actually managed by the informal sector, which is also known as the kabadiwalas, or they come and pick up from each and every house generally. So again, the lack of regulatory framework where e-waste is disposed properly or reaches the right recycling center is a big issue in our country, I feel. Brand owners or importers, because most of electronic goods are imported in the country. We yet to see their participation in proper disposal mechanism where they work with stakeholders in waste value chain, including formal and informal recycling, let's say, players in the market. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Raghav. Looking at the waste value chain that you talked about, recently I read that only half of the municipal waste gets collected and far less gets recycled. Like you said, there are a lot of different gaps in this chain. And like you said, the informal workers are not really recognized. And so we see a lot of these gaps. As a key player in this area and someone who has created business value in the sector, what are the opportunities? You did say that there has been a very lack of public-private partnerships in the sector, but what are the opportunities that you see for public-private partnership to work on these gaps? Where can they really plug in?
To answer your question, we have one of the research actually done to see how the municipalities are right now functioning in waste management. So it kind of pointed out the efficiency at 35% for all the municipalities collectively in Nepal, which is pretty low. And we see almost 50% of their total municipal solid waste management cost of municipalities in just sweeping and waste collection. And within that, there's only just 10 to 20% of actually waste, that is being treated in a proper manner, and remaining is just disposed in landfills. So we see a lot of gaps in the system. And as a private company, we have been working in the sector. So when we work, we obviously try to achieve maximum efficiency in terms of how do we collect, how we process the waste. So we bring in a lot of technology in terms of, let's say, integrated IT system, or in terms of how we post-process the waste. So that actually can be fulfilled by private companies, I feel, because they would probably have more insight in it, or at least try to collaborate with other companies from outside Nepal in terms of learning the new infrastructure or technology that's being implemented around the world. So that has been one of the things. Also, what I feel is collection efficiency, which is the percentage of recyclable waste materials collected out of total waste, influences the cost of municipal solid waste management, while the revenue relies on the material recovery, collection efficiency, and the price of recovered materials. So private and public partnership can actually work here to create businesses, jobs, streamline the operations. There's room for bringing efficiency in the entire process. So this is one of the, and another one of the major important point is leveraging the strength of informal recycling sector. We almost have a really significant population that is actually invested in waste collection sector. And we think that once we make the systems more circular, they will have a big role in this whole process. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the intervention. Definitely, I think the whole idea of having a very strong public-private partnership, particularly in this sector, is very important. We can maybe move on with one more question, because I see a lot of different questions, insightful questions on the chat. I just opened it. Maybe one last question, and then maybe we can move on to the questions from the floor. My question is to Anouk. Like Raghav said, there has been challenges in influencing consumer behavior, because we know that segregation is important, but still that's not happening. Behavioral challenges always remain there. But along with the consumers, I feel there have also been challenges roping in manufacturers. Many times it is manufacturers that hold up the path to circularity, as it may mean added responsibility to them or overhauling of traditional models that they're very attuned to. So in your opinion, Anouk, what is the best way to make producers and manufacturers accountable to their actions?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this question a lot, and I think it's not that black and white. I mean, what I'm trying to say there is like, it depends on which kind of manufacturers you talk about. Are we talking about artists and small industries, or do we talk about big manufacturers and stakeholders? Because there is a really big difference there of who you can keep accountable actually for their actions, right? So to give you an example, when I visit a dye house or a factory where yarn and wool is colored in Nepal for one of my clients, I would expect from them that they are responsible for the chemicals that they might use and recycle the water and not dump the waste in the river, right? This is, in my opinion, the full responsibility of the producer. But a few weeks ago, I came to one of the factories where I really questioned if the recycling system for the water was working well. And it came out, it didn't. And it really didn't seem to be high on their priority list to fix it as well. So that means that it's not necessary that the owner of the factory feels responsible to take care of their environment, right? And here I believe that the owner of the factory is really accountable, but I also believe we have to have policies in place that keep these people accountable. But when I look into smaller industries, or I would almost say artisanal industries, it's much more difficult to keep people accountable for their use of sustainable materials. Because when I go to Palpa and I meet with local weavers there and see how they have a very inefficient supply chain of yarn, it comes far away from India. They have no idea how it is produced, what quality of material has been used to make the yarn. I can't keep these weavers accountable because they are just very small industries. They don't buy big enough quantities and they will not be able to trace where their yarn actually comes from. But in the meanwhile, I think a much bigger industry in Nepal is responsible for this, and that's the yarn industry, because Nepal exports around 15 billion worth of yarn to Turkey and India each year. But one of the reasons the Dhaka industry has a hard time to revive and be more sustainable is because of their unreliable supply of yarn. Like, I really believe that the artists who make the final products here cannot be accountable for this situation, but we have to ensure that the yarn industry and the associations take their ethical responsibility to also supply to local industries and the local market and see potential beyond their own product. You know, and we see this in several industries in Nepal where quality products are only made for export, most often because these big industries, factories, stakeholders, they don't really see a valuable business in Nepal, right? And if I talk about this with the yarn industry, what we have done several times, the answer will be the amount of yarn we produce in a day is what we need in a year in Nepal. But for me, that's not a reason not to provide. It's your ethical responsibility. And I think policy should be in place that say that a percentage of whatever you produce in the country should be available to the local market.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, it really not always what I'm trying to say is that you cannot always keep the producer itself accountable.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was very
That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Very insightful and very specific. Thanks so much, Anouk. Before we move on to the questions from the floor, I would like to give you all three of the panelists a question to ponder upon. Dr. Arab, do I see your hand? Yeah. Are you wanting to say something?
Okay, yes. I mean, the last two interventions are extremely important. One is that really showing the absolute necessity for public-private partnerships, where you will find the common interest in moving ahead, because building partnership, many people work on that, but usually they don't work because they don't find the real common interest. So that to take up, there should be a business case behind a partnership, otherwise it doesn't work. This is one thing. The last intervention shows very much how you need, first of all, to be well aware about the market. But there is something that we have used a lot in the UN language, which I found very accurate now, is what we call the common but differentiated responsibility. So everybody is accountable, but at a different level. And obviously, if the big companies do not lead by example and they keep on polluting because nobody can touch them because they are powerful, you cannot go to the small one and oblige them to do it. But if the big one do respect rules or become greener through the value chain, it goes down to them and they will be able slowly and slowly to come to that. But this requires, to come to the whole picture, a proper policy and legislative framework. If the government is washing its hand and getting money from the big companies, then you cannot do it at the bottom line. So it's extremely important that all the different stakeholders assume responsibility in what we call common but differentiated responsibility. But they are all responsible and accountable at different stages.
Definitely agree with that. And I think that really touches upon the next question that I really wanted to ask about how circular economy is all about systemic solutions. And it's all about people sharing that common interest, coming together, not just common, but having different interests, but also having the bigger purpose of addressing the finite resources crisis. And I think all of them coming together, from business models, product and service design to legislation, manufacturing, they all have to come together. And I think that's where my next question lies. Dr. Arab, you've touched upon it, but I would want the three of you to kind of ponder upon this question, and maybe we can answer this at the end of the panel after the Q&A session. But what do you think needs to be done to make this coordinated and comprehensive approach of circular economy work in Nepal? You all have been experts in your fields. And how would it align with what you have envisioned for yourself, your company in the coming years? So that's just for you to ponder upon. Maybe we can move on to the questions from the floor. There are many questions. I'm sorry if I won't be able to address all of the queries, but starting off with this question from Kanaguru. He is interested to learn how infrastructures and land conversions fit into circular economy, as this is one of the largest issues. So land, mostly infrastructures and land conversions. Maybe we can take 3-4 more questions, and then we can maybe divide it among the panelists. The other question is about how can we initiate the transition towards the circular economy, focusing on agriculture and forestry sector. I'm just reading through the question, just bear with me. How do we link the project concept into local governments, such as municipalities, rural municipalities, that are really the action side of any project and development activities? So maybe this one I would like to give to Dr. Ara. Would you want to take it? Yeah, how do we link the project concept into local government, such as municipalities and rural municipalities? You have touched upon that in your presentation, but yeah, if you'd want to elaborate.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it is essential. And if we have failed for the last 20, 30 years on our sustainability agenda, it's because we have not been giving the right responsibility and means to the local governments and local communities. It depends on the political structure in each and every country, how it goes down. Either it is just top-down mandatory from the government to the local authorities, or the local authorities have power. They need to have power and they need to be able to handle that. So they need to be given proper responsibility in handling that. You cannot handle the waste management issue at the national level. You can enact, you can put a policy, but it has to be done at the local level. So how it has to be done is to enable them, give them the responsibility, and give them the means to do it. In many cases, the local taxation system is an important one. Of course, you are thinking about properly elected people who are assuming their responsibility and so on. So I'm not questioning the governing system, assuming that you have the proper mayor and local authorities who are doing it. But in order to do so, you always need to have a kind of consultative process within at local level, exactly as you can have it at the level of parliament and the government side. So you don't leave a leader alone. A leader alone will fail. Even in a company, a government, and so on, if they don't listen to the other, interact with the other, it will not work. So translating a policy and a strategy at local level is a condition to its implementation and success. But saying that doesn't mean that it works. You need still to enable them, to give them the resources. And I know that in Europe, for example, the local taxation system, levying taxes here and there on housing and so on, is one of the most important resources for them to be able to manage their city, which you don't have necessarily in many developing countries in Asia. They all depend on something trickling down from the government to the local level. So working with the local authorities, empowering them and making them responsible for managing their city with their means is an absolutely important step to move towards circular economy, because it happens at their level. The circularity is at local level, is at city level, not at national level.
Thank you so much, Dr. Araf. The next question may be Anouk, Raghavendra, whoever wants to take it. How do you initiate the transition towards the circular economy, focusing on agriculture, land, and the forestry sector? So, and if you want to take that up.
I'm not sure if I'm the right person to answer this question.
Raghavendra, would you want to take that up? Because you did talk about infrastructure, but how would that come into play when we transition towards circular economy? I think you're on mute. Can we have?
Yeah, now it's unmuted. So whenever we talk about circularity, we always look at the end of the product. So even when we talk about agriculture now, we always have to think about what to do with the agricultural waste once we come up with, end of the let's say, life cycle. So that also probably we already have a lot of projects actually going on in Nepal. Some of them have been successful actually, and this is regarding producing biogas or electricity through agriculture and farm waste. So this is, I'm purely talking in perspective of waste and how it's really worked for these, infrastructure. And the second good part about these industries is they produce a lot of manure, a lot of organic fertilizer, which can be actually sent back to farms. So this is one of the, let's say, very recent development where successful actually public and private partnership model has been implemented in our country, and few of them are already in construction. A few more of them are already in construction. So I feel projects like these actually kind of really implement the whole concept of circular economy, in at least in agricultural sector. I'm not sure about exactly how we can implement in forestry because I think someone else can answer that better, I feel.
Sure.
Yeah.
Dr. Araf, would you want to take that up maybe briefly, and we can move on to another question?
I was replying to an email, so to a question already. Sorry. Can you reframe it? I was on a chat replying to some people.
No worries. How can we transition towards circular economy, taking consideration of the agriculture, the forestry sector, and the
Okay, perfect. First of all, the key element here is the word transition. In most of the decision policy we have taken, we have neglected the time needed for a transition, and transition can be more or less quick or takes time depending on what we are talking. And in an agriculture process, because it will touch on long, very old practices, you need to study very carefully what will be the impact on improving resource efficiency, improved land management, how you can better use, how you can take out slowly the harmful substances, and also enable people, protect people who live on a very low income in order to help the agriculture and the society behind it in order to keep on working agriculture and not discourage them and move them back to cities as workers where it becomes a big problem. So the government, mainly in this sector, agriculture and rural areas, has an extremely important role, one in protecting the agriculture sector and the workers and the farmers and society depending on it, but also enabling them, and if possible with some incentives, to make sure that the transition is managed properly until they go to the next step of good business, reliable business, so that they continue providing to the market new product, organic product, better quality product, providing them with the necessary support. This is essential during a transition period. So more than the industry or any other sector, agriculture requires a longer transition period that cannot be done with the government support. And the EU has fantastic experience on that. And every year they have problem with the agriculture sector because of this very long and transition period, and because it touches on the roots of ecosystem management and social balance.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arab. I have a very interesting question. Maybe Anouk can answer this. To what extent are cultural preferences going to play a role in the move to circular economy? Because what we have seen is people are now embarrassed to receive plastic straw. I think that's a very good move that we've made. Can that be extended to other items as well?
So I didn't hear your last sentence well.
Oh, can that be extended to other items?
Just before that, sorry. What? Something with plastic?
Okay, before that. How does cultural preferences, how is it going to play a role in the move to circular economy? Because for now, we've really, had a very good move from plastic straws. We've moved to sustainable straws. And I think that's all because we've made that switch. How is it possible for that to be taken forward? And can that be extended to other items as well? Because you've been working with a lot of different companies, so maybe
in terms of Nepal, I would take it a little bit in a different way. Mm-hmm. Instead of changing behavior, I think in Nepal, sometimes I feel we should stop changing behavior, because in the essence of Nepal, and the true Nepali culture, we are very good in recycling. We are not very we don't waste a lot. And Nepalese, if you look at their, on a very local level, they are very careful about the use of their materials. And I think we have to stop actually behavior change where they look up to what a developed country are actually consuming and what they, because I think we don't go far back. I think even your parents and your grandparents, they know very well how to be responsible with their resources. So where in Europe, that might be 60 years ago, right? But here it's still so close to us. It feels like 60 years ago, but it's not. We know how to recycle water. We know how to recycle cans into pans, how to, a plastic bag, for example, if you look to a normal household in Nepal, where we in Europe have a plastic bag, single-use plastic bag, we throw it in the dustbin, isn't it? Here, if I come to a household and I take a plastic bag and I bring fruits, that plastic bag is used 30 times until it's no plastic bag anymore. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, I don't think in your household, if someone opens a glass jar for jam, that jam jar will be thrown in the dustbin. It will be reused. So it's actually very close to the Nepalese culture to reuse and recycle. And it's very sad to see how actually that very great behavior is changing towards the behavior of what we see in all these developed countries. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Can I add here, if you allow me, can I add here, it's an extremely important point what you are saying. When we talk about changing behavior, in all cases, if not in most all cases, we are referring to the modern way of life that the middle class is taking in the developing countries. Yeah. And all the work that we have been doing for the last 30 years, we value the local habits, because in any country in the world, the local habits are environmentally friendly, they are resource efficiency. I know very well how my mother used to work, how my grandfather used to work, how I have been teaching those practices. The big problem is the modern way of life. And if you go in certain part of Kathmandu, it's frightening. And this is the one that is moving, and the poor people moving to the middle class because they want to imitate the others, become much more wasteful. So the issue would be, please maintain your tradition, improve them, enhance them, and don't look at that. But the problem is that the trend is the one of the middle class that is extremely destructive. So when we say change behavior, is be careful with the modern trend of consumption that is very wasteful. But what you said about the traditional Nepalese way of life, yes, we need to communicate about it. It's the same here in Thailand, it's the same in Senegal, it's the same in Colombia. Go to local communities, they are perfect for environment.
Yes.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Arab. Thank you, Anouk. We have one more question from Ranjan Prakash Reshta. What are the key considerations that Nepal needs to focus for a transition to circular economy, other than policy and governance barriers? Is there something else that we could do? Because right now we're living in a new normal with the COVID-19 pandemic, and the recovery from that has to be green. So Raghavendra, I just saw you unmuting. Would you want to take that up?
So Disha, could you repeat the question once again?
Yeah. What are the key considerations that Nepal needs to focus for a transition to a circular economy, other than policy and governance barriers?
So I see now when we talk about apart from policies and government barriers, then it comes to actually individual level as a consumer or as a individual person, and private companies who are actually involved in these system management, or let's say even, for example, companies like us who are working in aiding circular economy. So I think what we do is we have to look for incentive model where consumers could participate in the whole system of circular economy. For example, of like just to give you a very simple example, where people have a habit of selling recyclables to Kawadiwala. So something like that has to continue for a prolonged period, where people actually really it's in a way of recycling their waste. So that has to continue for some time. And also on an individual level, what we see is segregation of waste, which actually again relies back to the companies who are collecting the waste. So private companies who are in this sector they need to implement systems which kind of increases the efficiency. And also this is also because of lack of awareness, or lack of awareness on a public level, that how does all this entire system of waste collection harms the nature, environment. So that all actually needs to be imparted through awareness programs, I think, to consumer level, so they are more clearer, or at least aware about how my actions are affecting the nature, environment. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Raghav. I see someone's screen popping out. Could you please unshare it? Thank you so much. I think that was a technical glitch. Thank you so much, everyone, for the questions. It's been really, really insightful. I've been taking a lot of notes. But yeah, I think before we end the panel, before I give a few takeaways from my side, I would want all the panelists to just provide their interventions on the question that I had asked. What is that one suggestion that you have for this coordinated approach of circular economy to work in Nepal? And how does that align with your vision of your company, yourself in the coming years? Maybe Dr. Arab, you can go. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I will put it very simply. I did not mention it earlier. Working on circular economy as well as sustainable consumption production makes good business sense. It's not just an environmental issue. It's not just a matter of conscience, because this will not lead very far. But if we really show that after a transition period that could receive some incentive and support, it does make good business sense, and this is the bottom line of resource efficiency, then you move to circular economy, then you move to sustainability. So it's not just a conscious issue. You get money out of it, you get benefit, and that's where the government has to come in and provide there. So governance, policy, all this, yes, but move on activities where it makes good business sense and focus on one or two priorities where you can deliver. Too many, you cannot do much. It's too vague, too large, then you fail. Start at the smallest level, and which I will call the smallest common denominator between various stakeholders to move together to one step, but a small step. It will create a trust and move to the next one. We are not taking the time for that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arab. Moving on to Anouk.
Yes, I didn't hear your full question, but
would you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, please.
Sure. What do you think needs to be done to make the coordinated and comprehensive approach of circular economy work in Nepal? Because we've talked a lot about systemic solutions, and how that's maybe just one suggestion of your, one glaring suggestion that you have in mind, and how would it align with what you have envisioned for your company or yourself in the coming years?
Okay, let me just end with an example, and I think that how it also relates to my work locally. I think what's very important to me is support these great young innovative entrepreneurs in Nepal who are the change makers of today for a better tomorrow. They might be small, but they are the future, right? And I was thinking of giving this example today of one of these great entrepreneurs, and I hope that a lot of young people with great innovative ideas that are very adding value to this circular economy have the courage to make the first step towards, setting their own entrepreneurial steps. So we have this, I wanted to give this example of this great young entrepreneur. His name is Manish Thapa. I think a lot of you know him. He started Antidote, and I know them from just in the beginning. And Antidote, they tackle this big issue. We all know that Nepal and India, they have this huge wedding industry and festival industry, where we traditionally buy and give clothes for every festival we attend. We wear the clothes only once. It ends up in our cupboards and it piles up and it's never used again. What Manish has done is he found a great solution to not only create less waste or solve this waste problem, but also I feel he's changing customer behavior in a country where recycling or wearing someone else's clothes and buying secondhand is not really a thing yet. So what he basically does is he collects clothes from people who have, like, for example, your wedding dress, and he rents them out for you. So he's basically a service provider. And he keeps it clean, he keeps it maintained, and it's great on so many levels, right? And I think this kind of businesses are changing Nepal, are changing customer behavior, great solutions for the waste and the fashion industry. And for myself, it's just very important that we create space and support for these entrepreneurs who are making this change.
Thank you so much, Anouk. And finally, on to Raghavendra.
Yeah. So just to conclude from waste perspective, I think what we also feel is the whole idea of waste now needs to shift from consumers to producers in a circular economy. And we strongly believe that policies related to extended producer responsibility, which is also globally known as EPR, basically where producers are being more responsible in considering the end of life cycle of a product, how does it come back to again the system. So that is, I feel, one of the most important policy level change that actually can, after that, a coordinated engagement between various stakeholders, producers, consumers, particularly waste management companies, recyclers, they all can work together actually to bring the materials back to the system. And unless we don't implement a system like EPR, it's very difficult for businesses or companies to come and participate in this, because right now we don't have such policies, and there's no interest to engage from business community with waste companies or recyclers. So this gap has to be fulfilled through policy level, we feel. And once that is done, then we will see a lot of engagement between all the stakeholders, and probably we'll see a lot of new industries, new jobs coming up because of this particular policy level, let's say, implementation.
Thank you so much, Raghav. It's been really, really insightful. It's been very good. And thank you so much, panelists, for a very well-rounded discussion. I really would like to summarize the session because we had so many things coming up. But a few takeaways from my side, if I could, like something that really, really stuck to me. I have 3 takeaways. Basically, keywords that really have been running through my mind again and again after all the conversation that we've had. First is systemic solutions. Definitely, circular economy is a means, it's not an end, and it works only if it can transform systems and when we adopt a more holistic lens. So when we think in systems, we begin to see connections between people, places, ideas. We begin to see how we can create opportunities to generate economic, social, societal, and environmental gains. So taking into consideration of policies, that's very important to provide that kind of framework, the governance structure, and having every stakeholder onto place, ministries, industries, and also providing solutions, product innovation. So basically, like Dr. Ara put it, looking at common but differentiated responsibilities at that. And the second keyword that really has been in my mind is thinking globally but acting locally. Circularity does not happen at a national level. It happens in cities. So recognizing the opportunity to drive social change with positive economic transformation, empowering locals, and putting people at the center at a local level. And finally, the moment is now. This is the time. This is the perfect time. Circular economy is not a choice anymore. It is an absolute necessity. We decide how tomorrow will be by what we create today, but by what we do today. This is the moment to reimagine. And I think something that has been going on in my mind, we keep on telling ourselves, we keep on pacifying ourselves that, the end is just the beginning. I think we need to start saying that when we look at products, when we look at materials, their end is just the beginning of a new life. So with that, I would like to end this session, and I would like to hand it over to the Deputy Head of Cooperation of the European Union Delegation to Nepal, Eloisa Astudillo Fernandez.
Hello. Oops, sorry. Thank you to all of you for this very lively, challenging, and interesting conversation. I would also like to thank the panelists and also all the participants that have challenged the panelists with very thoughtful questions. I think Sadikchya have also taken some notes and have come up with very similar, let's say, keywords to summarize this discussion. The first one would be cities. I think, I mean, as we all know, Nepal is the fastest urbanizing country in South Asia. And has right now a very low rate of urbanization. This means that 65% of the workforce works in agriculture. This means that the time to start thinking and changing these systems is now, before we have this much bigger mass of consumers, of people reaching the middle class, which will come with graduation. So it is absolutely essential that the work is done now. The second word that I think is very important that came out is this question of accountability and who pays for what. Because if we don't do this, if we don't tackle the overuse of resources, the waste management, who pays for this? And the people who pay for it are the most vulnerable people, the people who live next to waste disposal centers, the people whose houses get flooded and whose lands get flooded because the waste is not being managed, the people who don't have a healthy life because their water sources are polluted. So who needs to pay for it? And of course, accountability comes at very different levels. And it's not the same to talk to a very artisanal small producer than to talk to someone who has a big industry, or even to talk about to government. But it's very important to think that someone is actually paying for it, and we have to identify who is paying for it, and is it the right person who is paying for it? And what can we do at the initial stage, at the design stage, at the reuse stage? Do we have secondary markets that can be created through different resources, etc.? And the third one, and I think this links very neatly with the current opportunities in Nepal, is this idea of localization. So working with local governments, the new federal context gives a very, very special opportunity to tackle these questions. We have now new local governments at rural palikas, at city palikas, that have the mandate and can work on these things and need to be empowered to understand what opportunities they have and how they can work with their local businesses to really try to bring in some principles. And as Arab said, they don't have to do everything now. They can start. They can start with something. We need to start with something. So these are the three takeaways that I got from this session, and I would like to thank you all very much to have participated. We hope this is a beginning of a very, very interesting conversation, and that we hope to see many things in the coming years, both with Switch Asia from the EU, with local entrepreneurs and with the government, to see how we move and change the economic way of working here in Nepal. So namaste and thank you to all, and I wish you an excellent day.
And now we end the program with EU anthem performed by Kutumba Musical Band.